I remember it being late October, and the chill in the air hinted that winter wasn't far off. My son, Jake, and I had been planning a father-son camping trip for weeks. We wanted to experience something different, away from the world of technology and distractions. The woods in the Appalachian Mountains seemed perfect, secluded, vast, and known for its crisp autumn beauty. We set out on a Friday afternoon, hiking several miles deep into the forest. As we made our way along the trail, the towering trees and rustling leaves provided a sense of peace. Jake, only 10 years old, was thrilled with the adventure. He had his small backpack and a wooden walking stick we'd found along the way. By dusk, we found the perfect clearing near a small stream. We pitched our tent, built a fire, and roasted some marshmallows. The stars soon blanketed the sky above us, and we fell asleep to the sound of the flowing stream. The first night passed without incident, and we woke up to a beautiful sunrise filtering through the trees. Jake and I spent the day exploring the forest, listening to birds and chasing frogs near the water. As evening approached, we gathered around the fire once again. That night, something felt different. The wind had picked up, and the woods seemed eerily quiet. As we sat in front of the fire, the usual chirps of crickets and the rustling of small animals seemed to have vanished. We brushed it off at first, thinking it was just the wind playing tricks on our ears. But then Jake said, "Dad, do you hear that?" At first, I didn't hear anything. Then, from deep within the forest, there was a faint, rhythmic sound. It wasn't an animal call. It was more like a low hum or moan carried by the wind. I told Jake it was probably just the wind whistling through the trees, but my gut told me otherwise. As the night wore on, the strange sounds seemed to get closer. It felt like the forest itself was closing in on us. Then, around midnight, it happened. We were inside the tent trying to get some sleep when we heard loud snapping sounds coming from the woods, as if branches were being broken. I sat up, heart pounding. Jake grabbed my arm, his eyes wide with fear. "Dad, something's out there," he whispered. I unzipped the tent and peered into the darkness. The fire had died down, casting long shadows, but I couldn't see anything beyond the first few trees. The air felt thick, like something was watching us from just beyond our sight. The snapping and rustling continued, moving closer. "Get your shoes on," I whispered to Jake. We didn't wait. Grabbing a flashlight, I quickly packed up our essentials, leaving behind the rest of our gear. The sounds grew louder, now accompanied by an odd, almost mechanical clicking noise that sent shivers down my spine. Whatever it was, it didn't sound like any animal I'd ever encountered. We moved fast, but not fast enough. As we started down the trail, the unseen presence followed. There was something just beyond the edge of the beam from my flashlight, slipping through the trees, out of view, but always there. Jake clung to my hand, and I could feel his pulse racing. We could hear something moving behind us, keeping pace but never revealing itself. The sense of dread grew with each step. I wanted to tell Jake that everything would be fine, but I didn't know what we were dealing with. After what felt like hours, we finally broke through the tree line and made it back to the dirt road where our car was parked. I shoved our things into the trunk, and we jumped inside, slamming the doors. As I turned the key in the ignition, I looked back toward the woods. The forest stood silent once again, as if nothing had ever happened. We drove away, leaving the dark forest behind, but Jake and I still talk about it to this day. Whatever it was that stalked us in those woods, we never saw it, but we certainly felt its presence. And neither of us has been back to those woods since. This is one story I won't ever forget. The sun hung low in the sky that day, leaves crunched beneath my boots, and Bear, my faithful German shepherd, trotted ahead, his nose to the ground, loving every moment of our hike. We had set out early to explore a lesser-known trail deep in the forest. I'd heard stories about the place, mostly folklore about strange happenings and mysterious sightings, but I brushed it off. I've never been one to believe in those kinds of things. Besides, with Bear by my side, I felt invincible. The trail wound through dense woods, far removed from any signs of civilization. As the hours passed, we ventured deeper and deeper into unfamiliar territory. The trees seemed to grow taller, their branches weaving together like skeletal fingers above us, blocking out the sun. I figured we'd loop back soon enough, but I began to notice something strange. The air felt different, heavier, and the usual sounds of the forest seemed muted. No birds, no wind in the leaves, just the padding of Bear's paws and my own footsteps. Then, without warning, Bear froze. His ears perked up, his body stiff, hackles raised. I immediately stopped, my heart beginning to race. I'd never seen him like this. Slowly, his head turned toward a thick grove of trees off the trail. I followed his gaze but saw nothing, just trees, shadows, and an overwhelming sense of unease creeping over me. I called his name softly, but Bear didn't move. That's when I heard it. A faint rustling in the underbrush. At first, I thought it might be a deer, maybe even a squirrel, but the sound was heavier, like something larger. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As I strained my eyes to peer into the darkened woods, I caught a glimpse of movement, a shadow darting between the trees. It was fast, too fast to be human and too deliberate to be an animal. My heart pounded in my chest. Bear let out a low growl, his teeth bared. I knew we needed to move, and fast. I called Bear again, this time louder, and tugged on his leash. Reluctantly, he followed, but his eyes never left the direction of that shadow. We quickened our pace, but every few minutes I could hear it again. The soft sound of footsteps matching ours, always just out of sight. I turned to look back, but there was nothing. Still, the feeling of being hunted lingered. We kept moving, the trail growing more and more unfamiliar. I pulled out my phone to check the map, but there was no signal. The sky was darkening quickly, and I knew that being lost out here after sunset was not an option. My breath grew ragged, my legs heavy, but Bear and I pressed on, both of us unnerved by whatever was out there, lurking. At one point, Bear stopped again, and I heard it clearer this time. A guttural, low sound, like a growl, but not from any animal I knew. It was deep, primal, and close. Too close. I could feel my hands trembling as I gripped Bear's leash tighter. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see what was following us. With a burst of adrenaline, I broke into a run, dragging Bear with me, my eyes desperately searching for any sign of the trailhead. The woods blurred around us, branches slapping at my face, the ground uneven beneath my feet. I could feel the creature's presence growing nearer, the air thick with tension. And then, just when I thought we'd never make it out, we stumbled into a small clearing. I collapsed against a tree, panting, my mind racing. Bear stood next to me, still alert. But at least we were out of the thick forest. The sun was almost gone, but in the fading light, I could make out the distant shape of the trailhead. We didn't waste any time. We hurried back, and I swear, the moment we left the woods behind us, that oppressive feeling vanished. It was like stepping from one world back into another. The wind picked up again, and the birds returned to their evening songs. I've never been one to scare easily, but something about that place, the way the trees seemed to close in, the way the shadows moved, it still gives me chills to this day. I don't know what was out there following us, but I'm not eager to find out. Since then, Bear and I have stuck to more familiar trails. But every now and then, when we're out walking late in the evening, I catch him stopping, his ears perked, staring into the distance, as if remembering. And I wonder if it's still out there, watching, waiting for us to return.